So we have a queue for questions. It starts there and then goes to Carol and then to Kelly. Anybody else?
This is a bit more of a discussion comment to kind of what has been just mentioned by everybody. I think all women struggle with how do you respond to criticism, to negative energy coming from, I think we're a little bit specifically addressing men, men in power, and or even men who are like less powerful than us but still challenge what we do. And I actually want to kind of take what you said, Joan, and I want to challenge it a little bit, because I think that a lot of us, it's not always good to escalate something, right? It's not always helpful. We see that escalation happening right now with our leadership, and it's not useful. But what I do think has been a systemic problem is if we ignore bad behavior too much, that can become, and it's a choice you have to make moment by moment. Everybody knows that depending on the scenario in which you find yourself, sometimes ignoring someone's behavior or choices or something is the right choice to make, because otherwise they're just not going to hear you, or you'll be outnumbered, or you'll even be hurt physically. But I think there are a lot of times where we believe it's sort of social suicide or career suicide to take a stand, and I think the reason is because we have given power to anyone who would stand in opposition to that. So it can be everything from a very small comment that's made. I work at a friend's bar, and a gentleman said, "Oh, well, I'll have that drink, but boy, if I was with my guy friends, I would order that." And I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Well, it's a foofy drink." And I said, "By foofy, you mean feminine?" I said, "Tell me, is pineapple feminine? Is almond juice feminine? Is like, how is this feminine?" And so it's a construct, and those types of things are constructs which we can challenge if we feel safe to do so, right? But that goes all the way up to, you know, the leader of our country, and sometimes when people don't listen or when we don't have the power to address them. But I guess that I would say I would like to challenge all of us to start kind of where Rawa was talking about with our children. You know, if we teach our children from the beginning that boys are allowed to have certain behaviors because they have testosterone in them, and girls are allowed to do different types of things, and that is just how they are. There are certain differences, absolutely. There's physical differences that I don't deny, but I think that we train our children, and thus our grown men, to behave in certain ways, and by our silence, we allow it to continue. And I would encourage everyone to think twice before we do that. And obviously there are scenarios in which this must be applied cautiously. But I think that there are too many times when we let things go. And you know, whether you're a Hillary Clinton fan or not, you know, there was a discussion apparently in her book about when Trump was looming behind her at the second debate, and she thought, this guy is a creep right now. He's being creepy, he's invading my space, he's interrupting me, he's being disrespectful, and if I did that to him, he would lose it. But I had to make a very careful calculation about what I should do in response to that, and I chose to ignore him because that's what I thought you do to people like that. But when that is not enough, we have to think really hard about what we're going to allow and what we're going to speak out about. And, you know, again, it depends on the power that you have in any given scenario and whether you're safe. But I just wanted to
But then if you can't allow it, right? So you have to stand up for it. Because if you allow it, then it makes it the norm, and that just is not going to work.
Right.
And there's a ways of calling it out. I'm an organizer, so I actually disrupt this stuff all the time. I'm living in it all day, every day. And we do call it out, especially when we do movement work. A lot of times we think because we're all doing social justice work that we do not get to call out the patriarchy, right? Actually, we live to call out the patriarchy now. It's a new thing. And I say this, you know what? The easiest, safest thing you can do, make sure there's people around you. But I always say, This is coming from a place of love. I'm not calling you out. I'm actually calling you in. But be very specific. Name it. You have to name it because a lot of times it's also the norm for men. They don't understand it a lot of the times what they're doing because this is just part of our like social construct, right? So you have to call it out. Similarly, when people say racist, misogynistic, whatever the thing that they say, call it out, because if we don't, and if we don't disrupt their behavior, maybe they don't know what's going on, or maybe they are doing it intentionally, but at least you did your part, right? So we all have to do that whenever we can. Another thing that I like to say is that hurt people hurt others. I don't know how, I'm sure, you know what, 1 in 3 women in the world is violated. There are many women here, so I assume many of you we're all in the same boat in many ways. That's the reality that we're living in. And so if we actually want to change the future, we have to call that out. I mean, like 1, 2, 3. You know, like that's too many. It's happening to all of us, and it's happening because we're also perpetuating it because we're not putting a stop to it. When we see it, we need to stop being afraid and name it.
Let's give Joan a chance to also respond to this.
Well, I just want to say that I think I agree to remain silent in the face of this kind of thing is unthinkable. You're part of the problem. And so finding voice of the good folks in the community and the leaders in this community, I think we need to do more to address this problem. I took great part in the Open Buffalo program that is underway. I'm hoping that will go someplace, but I think our children need role models too. And I think that's why I think that we have, the good folks in Buffalo have to start, and our society have to start being more vocal about, in a positive way, again, be more vocal. But I just want to give one example. Sometimes maybe it does work to remain silent because under the Mazziello administration, the neo-Nazis had a plan to come to Buffalo on the City Hall, steps of City Hall. I don't know if any of you remember that, but I just happened to be with the NCCJ, at those days called. At that time, we had an emergency meeting to decide what are we going to do. You know, the neo-Nazis are coming. They're going to have a big demonstration down in City Hall, and what shall we do? So we decided that we were going to ignore it, and we were going to have a lot of copies made of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. We were going to work with the school system to talk about your freedoms of free speech and how difficult it is under some circumstances to practice what we preach. But the neo-Nazi demonstration just was a big fizzle because it was just enough word got out to not go down and just to ignore them. And that's just an experience that I had in my life, you know. But I also, on the other hand, believe to remain silent when, in the face of racism is unacceptable, and we do need to use some creativity to get the women together. Close the door, and we'll address it.
Well, and then Kelly.
I had one thought at the beginning. This is such a great group. When I was working as an architect, working at Canon, one of the things that I did was to become the voice of the reconstruction projects, to work with the school board. And I can remember thinking, how can I best come before this really awful group, basically. I mean, it wasn't anywhere near as bad then, 10, 15 years ago, as it is today, or as it was. But it's sort of a lesson, and I would have to say, if I'm mentoring somebody who's trying to get into being an important force in whatever job they're doing, is that always do the homework that you have to do to the point where you are absolutely an expert on what you're about to talk about. You cannot have anything left unlearned. And I'm sure that that's good advice for a man, but it's critical for a woman. I've tried to talk about things where I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm immediately in a position where I can be booed off the podium or wherever I am. But for that group of people, a tall, low-voiced, white-haired woman gets up at the podium in front of the Board of Education, Amber remembers, telling them that they had to close 5 schools over the next 10 years in order to meet the state education requirements for that size district. It was a horrible thing to say, but I said it. People listened. All the people who were arguing with one another before that quieted down. And it was largely because they had all of the material that they needed in order to be able to understand that. It's a huge amount of work. It's more work than a man would have to do, probably. If it had been a man up there, though, I have a feeling, because of the way they are, that I had more success, because I appeared to be a gentle, informed, intelligent, understanding kind of woman, kind of human. The part that made it easy is that I am. You know, I didn't have to fake that. That's the other thing. You're talking about being frivolous was the word you use? I think that's probably an older word. Feisty. I'm trying to think back. I was never frivolous in 20 years of having my own architecture firm. Never made jokes. It was totally inappropriate in my workplace. I had to be solid. Come in, take over the room, the way my daughter does, Cindy Gash. Take over the room. I come with all the information you need in order to be able to make a decision. This is it. I will help you to make a decision. Sit down. A lot of work, exhausting. But I see it probably in everybody here. You had to do the same thing. You have to do it every day. And that's what Kelly does. Because she learned from me. Not completely, but I helped a little, right? But thank you.
Right, yeah, just as an editorial, I learned from both Amber and Carol, two huge lifetime mentors to me, one a client and one a boss, and they both taught me the importance of calm, consistency, and being very well prepared in any instance. So thank you for that.
Kelly Hayes is the most prepared person I ever met. At some point when we were...
My question.
Yeah, she still gets answered.
We're going to run short on time.
Yeah,
Okay.
So my question for each of you is 2 words I'd like to delve into. One of them is connections, and the other one is clarity. So my observation from when I researched for the paper I just presented was that the 3 women each were very good at making connections, and that I heard all of you, each of you, talk about connections, making connections. And face it, the opposite to that, or maybe running counter to it, is clarity. You each have a vision of where you wanted to go, and you continually harken back to it. But I could see, as each of you were talking, how easy it is to kind of get stuck, or not stuck, but just lose focus when you're busy making connections, when you're, in the middle of the vortex, whatever it is that you're creating. And so I guess I wanted to ask you that question of how to maintain that clarity of vision and keep the connections and, and solve the day-to-day, but keeping your eye on the prize.
You start.
I can start because I have a funny comment. So I can start. I have a couple of, the last year and a half of my life since I full-time started my business, I have, and it comes down to clarity. I'm very good at making connections. People, it's kind of an easy thing. I've been known as, actually, and labeled as a connector. But what I have not been known as or labeled as is focused, somebody who's like narrowly focused to getting things, I'm good at getting things done, but more like on this wide net, right? You bring a lot of people in. But what I've had to do in the last year and a half personally is dial back and narrow and focus. And that comes with clarity. That comes with this idea of clarity. To the extent of, in June, I said, I'm taking Facebook off my phone. And it sounds really silly, but you want to talk about clarity in your brain and your thought process. You know, I honestly, the fact that I have removed random opinions about food and everything else out of my life, it sounds silly, but it's like the amount of clarity is very much real there. And so I've actually struggled with this idea of losing connection through being so focused and so focused on clarity, as I have this idea of a vision and trying to implement this vision, you know, using a plan. So what I have found now as I'm planning my wedding, this is more personal, is that I have less connections now than I have had in my past, because I have been so focused. So, and that is a struggle, right? Is this idea of clarity and connection. And that's just my thing. So my piece of advice would be Facebook. Like get rid of all that, you know, and spend the energy on something else, like a good show or a good book, or you know, something else. That's my advice.
I think part of it is connections or relationships, right? And to me, you can have lots of connections, but what's really valued in life are the relationships you build, and that's how you affect changes through those relationships.
Good.
Clarity, those relationships help you find clarity. So who are the people that you're going to put around you as that circle? Who are the people that help you form? I look at it this way, you know, let's say, what's your strategic vision? And I think of it as this way: I have ideas. It's the team of people that I put around me at UB or a company. When we were doing the Genome Project, we were focused on a goal. And part of it was just, how do you know, something that, I talked to Amber about. Without education, no child is going to have a chance in this world. And if we don't find ways to make education, every child gets it, just like healthcare. The world is doomed, this country is doomed. But it's going to take people who get together, what are our common goals, and we focus on them. And we develop a message, and we take it out there. And someone's, when I was at the Athena Awards, they were asking me, well, what advice would you give to this young leader? And I looked at her, I said, you know what? Get up and lead. Be a leader, show the young people around you, this is what your passion is. Have them come around you, share their thoughts with you, and deliver the message. And I think no matter how old you get, where you are in life, having those relationships with other women, we could let a few men in every now and then. But it's just forming that community around you. And just don't get distracted. Just don't get distracted by all that noise that people are creating out there, because that's what then dilutes your mission.
Yeah. So I think for me, the easiest way that I can describe my work is really intersectionality. I know we use that word a lot, but it really is at those points where you're dealing with all these sort of different systems that are not working for a whole lot of people. So I work at the intersection of race, class, and environment. That's what I tell people all the time. There's a lot of clarity. Again, I told you guys I like edges. The eco-town, I think try to live in all three, because all these systems are very much connected. If we can find a solution for ways to be environmentally conscious, honestly, if we look at the economics of everything, and then we look at the social constructs, if we make good decisions at every single one of those points, we're going to create the most equitable, mixed income, mixed amenity neighborhoods that then addresses our issues with education and how education is funded and how they're resourced. It'll address the issues around what types of work people have and what have you. That means that all the different jobs that are available to us, if we work them and we pay some kind of sustainable wage, then we can actually all live more harmoniously together. We are going to be prepared for climate change and climate disruption. It is coming. So we need to invest and fortify the most struggling neighborhoods and those homes and those people, and then allow the gentrification that's coming to our city to happen. Our city is designed for 600,000 people. We have 282,000 people. We should never speak the words displacement, period. We have incredible neighborhood cultural tapestries and fabrics that do not exist in other cities. We need to find a way to maintain that. And again, so invest in the communities that already exist in Buffalo and then build all around them, and you're going to have the most amazing city in the world.
Yeah.
Hey.
Love it.
We have time for about about one, maybe two questions more. Anyone? Yeah, Karen.
So I wanted to just thank this panel so much and the people who put it together. It was incredibly rejuvenating to hear people who are eloquent and who are compassionate in a world that is so inarticulate and that was really, really important, I felt today. And I wanted to respond to Bernice's call to action. Just Buffalo is bringing Terry Tempest Williams here on October 12th, and I just finished reading a book that she wrote called Finding Beauty in a Broken World. And she concludes that one of her, I thought, eloquent conclusions was that finding beauty in a broken world means creating beauty in the world you find. And so while I share your central concerns of race, class, environment, and gender, I also find that in a world that is so broken and hateful, I need spiritual rejuvenation, and I find it in the garden. And so my major rejuvenation this week was walking out a few days ago and finding a flurry of monarch butterflies, which I've been trying to cultivate, and as you know, they're endangered. And so to see that that was successful was really important to me. And so I'm saying this specifically to Buffalo and Push Buffalo. One of my passions would be to see, in addition to the efforts with sustainability, to mobilize something around the kind of gardens that would bring pollinators to the green spaces that you're creating. So a couple days ago I was on Massachusetts Avenue looking at Push's places and the park there and so on. But and it's amazing. The work that you guys do is so phenomenal, and it makes me so proud, right, to be in this area. But I noticed that there's a lack of, there are rain gardens and there are green spaces, but there's a lack of the kinds of plants that will attract pollinators. And they also bring beauty, which I think is really important. And I know a lot, so one of the gifts of nature to us is that when you have a successful garden, the generosity of the garden is amazing. And I know a lot of gardeners who would love to share their plants. And I think it would be possible to organize like crews that would plant and maintain gardens. And so if anybody had an interest in that, it's something I would love to talk with you about.
So I just want to say, we actually do have several pollinator gardens. So we have about 50 vacant lots in the Green Development Zone. You might not have seen the pollinator garden. But also at Silo City, we have a whole pollinator garden, and we're doing beehives to train folks to use plantings to remediate soil and also to bring back plant life and migratory those kinds of things. So anyway, so it's ecological stewardship is what we have to call it. But I'm totally 100% with you. And we try to demonstrate not just pollinator gardens, but we use native plantings in all of our rain gardens because the way they can hold the water, if there's too much water, it slowly dissipates to the earth. They're also easier to maintain. Obviously, they're native to Buffalo. And then other things that we've done is like urban farming. So people, again, the idea of what the hands do teach the heart we're very much into. So it's like making people be connected to the land through gardening, producing food for their families, things like construction and building, the green trades themselves. And then, of course, weatherizing and installing solar on rooftops, another form of what the hands do, teaching the heart.
Got two more panelists.
I just want to say I do welcome that conversation. I have a community garden I maintain. I hired an intern this year who I paid,
cash out of my own pocket to help move things around, water when I couldn't. The idea of pollinators is really important to me, and something that I think on a small scale level could be done in our city is helping homeowners and small people who own a couple of units here or there, create gardens that are sustainable, that they can just plant and kind of maintain. It's something that's an education I do not have, but I do love gardening, so I welcome that conversation because I just want you to know it's easy to have grass, right? It's easy. It's not easy to have flowers and plants, and as a property owner, when you're not there all the time, that is a struggle. So I would welcome that. This year is planting trees, by the way. We're all about planting trees in the fall. This is last year was bulbs, right? This year is trees. So we're one step at a time, but yeah, let's talk.
I just wanted to say how important I think this conversation has been today, and that I honestly believe that the survival of our region depends on innovation and vision, and of our leaders and our future leaders. So the economic survival, we could either be globally competitive region, or we could just kind of sink into mediocrity. And Buffalo has been a leader in the past. We were a leader in many areas in the past. We don't have to always look to the past, but we can stand on the shoulders of those that led in the past also. And I just think we all like the feeling that Buffalo is coming back.
Yes.
So I'd just like to ask us all to express our appreciation for this panel. Dr. Raymond to close us out.
Oh, I just think that Joan said it best. You just said this conference, we began with the word innovation, and I'm leaving here with another I word, inspiration. That the 4 hours we spent together in this room has been absolutely mind-blowing and satisfying. It's very, even spiritual, actually, Kari. I'm glad you mentioned that word, too. And let's not have the conversation end here. Let's continue it, and let's see where it goes. So thank you all for coming. Come to our Gender Institute events, please, this semester. Next year, we have a great lineup, and hope to see you